we've got our seller, we've got our buyer, we've got our purchase price, and then we've got if there's contingencies, just meaning, hey, this will void this contract if these are not met. And that might be an appraisal, that might be getting financing. If we're doing a big purchase, even as a real estate investor, I do, sometimes financing comes into play. And that gets us out of the contract. Is there any money that's passed during that contractual time that says, hey, I'm going to be good for this piece of paper and signature that I'm putting here while we go and do our due diligence and walk the property, try to get our financing, do the appraisal for the financing, that kind of stuff?
Typically, there is earnest money. It may be
Hmm.
$500, it may be $1,000 on a bigger deal, it may be substantially more. It just depends. And again, that's all a point of negotiation. And I have seen that done a couple of ways. The safest way, in my opinion, and of course, disclaimer if I didn't say it before, all of this is generally speaking.
Sure.
Every situation is different. And so don't take whatever we're talking about here and think, oh, this, applies 110% to me because
Right.
the specifics and facts of your situation may be completely different. So seek that legal counsel, but we're speaking generally here. But typically the safest thing is then for you to at that contract go ahead and choose if you know a closing attorney. Now I'll say 90% of people, if you're not investors, probably don't. But if you know a closing attorney, go ahead and put that in there and take that escrow money, that $500, that thousand, if you don't have a realtor involved, and let that attorney hold that money so that it can be dispersed appropriately once the closing happens, or if for some reason the closing doesn't happen, return that money. I see though, sometimes the buyer holds the money. And of course, if a realtor's involved, the realtor is going to hold that money. So every situation is a little bit different. I do find most contracts, if there's not some sort of, close dealing relationship, you're going to want some kind of money just to see they've got skin in the game. Unless the
Right.
seller has reason to not ask for that, it's kind of unusual, probably not to have at least 500 or $1,000 and maybe much more on a bigger deal.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So a real estate attorney would be the best person to be holding your earnest money if
If
you're
you
not
don't have
going through a realtor. Yes. Okay, we've got the contract set up. We've put our earnest money down, and now we've done whatever we were going to do. If it, let's just say it's an as-is sale, so there was nothing to do. Now we've contacted you in your office. You have done the background work on the title search. What actually is happening on a title search?
on a title search, and this is really one of the most important jobs an attorney has. And I know a lot of the investors like, oh man, you're killing me because we show up with all the problems, right? We're typically investment property as a rule, that there's a reason you have that good deal. Maybe there's something quirky on it. Maybe there are 15 heirs that a grandparent left, and you've got to track all these people down. Maybe there was a will that wasn't probated. Just a lot of legal things that it's our job to do to make sure, hey, we go back a period of no less than 32 years and make sure that when you leave with a deed at the closing that you have valid title to the best of our knowledge and belief what's recorded, so that you've got valid title and you're actually paying for something. Like in the situation I used before with the person that was going to wire money without a title search, there were some things that had to be done. In that particular case, there had been a trustee had forgotten to pay the real estate taxes. So there'd been a tax deed issued.
Hmm.
So in that situation, you had to resolve that tax deed either by working out a deal with the person that holds the tax deed or through some action to set that tax deed aside, which requires chancery action. So those kinds of things that a lot of times sellers have no knowledge of. Maybe sellers don't realize there's $1,500 worth of garbage liens on their property because in Mississippi, anyway, the way that works is because the county is the one assessing it, there's no statute of limitations that can literally go back to the mid 90s when they started collecting garbage and say, hey, we never did collect on this money. And now it attaches to the property. And maybe it's been sold 4 times. And they're like, whoa, what are you talking about? It's almost like tag you're it. The buyer that's holding it, when they tack them on there, ends up getting to pay those. And we always go over that. We've actually got a form in our office to kind of explain that and tell people that, especially in investment property, that comes up a lot. Because of that, just as an aside, I do recommend landlords go ahead and just handle the garbage yourself, because once you start getting those garbage liens on there, it seems like it's kind of a nightmare to get them all cleared off and get it done. And so I would just add that into my cost of doing business and pay the garbage bills myself. So I know I don't have to worry about that, because if a tenant is using a PO box to get their car tag, it's never going to affect them. But
Right.
if and when that property is sold, that closing attorney is going, and it doesn't matter how old it is or how long it's been on there, unless and until the Mississippi legislature changes that, if we don't pay it, then when that subsequent buyer goes and tries to get a car tag, they're not going to let them. And then they would come to us and say, why didn't you pay this? And so,
Right.
that's just the way that is. Those kinds of things that you have no way of knowing. Maybe the person that is selling it forgot that they had an issue with a debt or a creditor, and there's a $2,000 or $3,000 judgment against them that has to be paid. If you don't make sure that's done at closing, then that attaches to the property. And when you get ready to either borrow money or to sell it, then it falls off on
On
you.
you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yes. So there are lots of things. And another common thing I see investors do, maybe they're out there and they're like I was, especially at the beginning, looking down those deals, and it's so much fun, and it is fun. But, they're talking to maybe two of the owners of the property, but not the third. When you're getting ready to sign a contract to sell property, if you're not talking and dealing with all the owners, you're kind of wasting your time. So when you send it, say you don't have a realtor and you're like, okay, I've got this contract and I'm going to send it to my real estate attorney and tell them we're ready to close, run title on this, we're ready to go. Well, you send a abstractor or whoever, they spend half a day searching it. They bill the attorney $100, $200, whatever it is. And the attorney looks at it and they say, okay, so this is owned by these three people, but you've only got a contract that you got me here for two people. You're going to have to get this other person on board. Well, maybe that other person doesn't want to sell, those kinds of things. And there's some of that you may be limited in what you can find out. Sometimes you can tell that doing things like going on Delta Computer Systems, doing
Who's
just
now?
your own legwork, seeing who's named. But sometimes if the property's been transferred or if it's an estate, it's not always obvious how many people need to be signing off on something. So just, do the best you can. But as you're talking to people, say, is there anybody else we're going to have to be dealing with on this? Because before you start spending money and energy, you want to make sure you've got all the players at the table, because otherwise you're kind of wasting your time. And I do see that come up a lot too. And that's sometimes people just don't understand. They think, oh, well, he hadn't had anything to do with this property and he didn't even talk to mom and daddy. Well, it doesn't matter. If mom and daddy died without a will, their kids have a share in it and they're all involved in this process. And that's a big surprise sometimes to people.